MPs are set to vote today on the government's controversial plan to raise national insurance to fund the NHS and social care. The tax, which breaks a manifesto pledge, came under attack by Labour in the Commons this lunchtime.
Working people will pay higher tax, those in need will still lose their homes to pay for care, and he can't even say if the NHS backlog will be cleared.
We're taking the tough decisions, Mr. Speaker, that the country wants to see. We're putting another £36 billion in. And what I'd like to know from the leader of the Labour Party, Mr. Speaker, is what is he going to do tonight?
We'll be asking who will benefit from the government's reforms and what sort of political risk Boris Johnson is running. Also on the programme. The biggest terror trial ever in France gets underway amid tight security. 130 people were killed in coordinated Islamist attacks in 2015. Over 1,000 people crossing the Channel in small boats this week. The Home Secretary is to hold talks with her French counterpart. Initial post-mortem results on Geronimo the alpaca, who was euthanised by the government last week, show no sign of bovine TB. And all eyes on Britain's Radekanu as she battles for a place in the semi-finals at the US Open in New York.
And coming up on the BBC News Channel, the Open is heading back to Northern Ireland after the success of Royal Portrush hosting the event 2 years ago. It'll do it again in 2025.
Hello and welcome to the BBC News at 1. MPs are to vote this afternoon on the Prime Minister's plans for a national insurance rise to pay for the NHS and social care. Yesterday, Boris Johnson announced what he called the biggest catch-up programme in the history of the NHS. £36 billion raised over 3 years to deal with the backlog caused by the pandemic. The move breaks a Conservative manifesto pledge not to raise taxes, justified, said Mr Johnson, because of the effects of COVID. This lunchtime at Prime Minister's Questions, the Labour leader Sir Keir Starmer attacked the government, saying some people needing care would still have to sell their homes. Here's our political correspondent, Damien Grammaticus.
Prime Minister!
Boris Johnson, he's now set to be a most unusual Conservative Prime Minister by raising tax to the highest levels seen in peacetime.
What this plan for health and social care does is deal after decades with the catastrophic costs faced by millions of people, the risks that they face up and down the country, that they could face the loss of their home, their possessions, their ability to pass on anything to their children.
I noticed the Prime Minister didn't stand by his guarantee that no one will need to sell their house to pay for care.
The Labour leader said raising national insurance would hit working people hard, while many would still have to pay large sums of the costs if they needed care.
His plan is to impose unfair taxes on working people. My plan is to ensure those with the broadest shoulders pay their fair share. I know they don't like that debate. The truth is, his plans don't do what he claims. People will still face huge bills. Many homeowners will need to sell their homes.
The Institute for Fiscal Studies has confirmed that this is a broad-based and progressive measure. The top 20% of households by income will pay 40 times what the poorest 20% pay. The top 14% pay half of the entire levy.
And Mr Johnson said Labour didn't have an alternative of its own.
Mr Speaker, if the Prime Minister is going ahead with this unfair tax, can he at least tell us this? Will his plan clear the NHS waiting list backlog by the end of this Parliament? Yes or no?
Mr Speaker, I think the whole House, indeed the whole country, can appreciate that we at least have a plan to fix the backlogs.
The tax rise will bring in about £36 billion over the next 3 years for the NHS and social care, but only around a fifth, £5.4 billion, will pay for care in the first 3 years. It'll mean that from late 2023, people pay a maximum of £86,000 for caring costs in their lifetime, but that won't cover their accommodation and food charges. So at the outset, the bulk of the $10 billion raised each year is to go to the NHS to help it deal with the backlog left by the pandemic. Millions of people who need treatment but haven't had it.
I was told that if things carried on as they were, business as usual, that we'd be looking at a waiting list of about 13 million in 3 years' time. Now, my choice is at that point, I can say, well, you know, we made a promise in the manifesto and we don't want to break it, and let's doggedly stick to it and let that waiting list go to 13 million. Or we can just confront the problem, be honest with the British people, take the difficult decisions.
So these are reforms that'll take years to work through, but they're ones Boris Johnson is staking his reputation on. Damien Grammaticus, BBC News, Westminster.
Let's join our Deputy Political Editor, Vicky Young, who's in Westminster for us. Vicky, what sort of political risk is Boris Johnson running doing this?
Well, the political landscape certainly feels a little bit distorted, doesn't it? He's borrowed billions of pounds to cope with the COVID pandemic, and now he is going to be putting up people's taxes. I think for Boris Johnson, he would have been very concerned about a rebellion on the backbenches that the Conservative Party is no longer a low-tax party. Now, that so far hasn't materialised, and I think is unlikely to materialise, partly because if you talk to Tory MPs, they've all got hundreds, if not thousands of constituents who know someone or themselves need NHS care. I think the question for him is going to be, will this extra money bring results? Certainly with the NHS, we know that it is capable of spending an awful lot of money. There's huge demand, and when it comes to social care, there is no real clear plan in terms of reform, and lots of this money won't arrive to social care for several years. But there are risks for the Labour leader too. He's hoping that the Conservatives will be punished for breaking a manifesto promise. I think the problem for him is that people will be looking and saying, well, what would you do? What is your plan? He thinks that the wealthy need to pay more, although he won't set out the details. And I think that puts him in a slightly weaker position. But certainly you could not fail to notice that Boris Johnson was delighted at the fact that at 7 o'clock tonight, the Labour Party are going to vote against more money, more taxes for the NHS.
OK, Vicky, many thanks. Vicky Young there. Well, I'm joined now by our social affairs correspondent, Michael Buchanan. Michael, there was a lot of debate in the Commons this lunchtime about whether these reforms will protect people from having to sell their homes for care. What's the reality?
Well, the reality is that the changes, when they kick in, are no guarantee that you won't have to sell your home. Remember that the cap means that people won't have to pay any more than £86,000 in social care costs, but they are liable for that sum up until that cap. And so, for instance, if somebody has lived in a house for a number of years, its value has gone up, it's maybe worth, say, £200,000, but they have got £10,000 maybe in savings, then the savings will contribute to the 86. But then where do they find the remainder of the money? It may be that the family choose to sell the house after that pensioner has died. But the BBC has calculated that if you are a single pensioner, and obviously it'll depend on where you live and what costs are locally. If you're a single pensioner, you may well need to have cash savings of in the region of £70,000 if you want to ensure that your house isn't sold either now or in the future.
And a point raised by Vicky there about people in need of social care now. Will these reforms help them?
In short answer, no, because there is no new money going into the system in this financial year. And there's a survey that was published today showing the extent of the need. You know, the number of people waiting for care assessments has gone up by a quarter in the past 3 months. The number of people waiting for more than 6 months for an assessment has gone up by more than 50%. Around 1 in 8 people are being forced to choose care packages that they don't want because the staff simply aren't there in order to deliver the care they want. And remember, there are over 100,000 vacancies in the care system. Now, the solution to a lot of this, say, social care leaders, is money now. And just a little point of context, if I may. The government announced they were going to put £5.3 billion into social care over 3 years. On Monday, they announced they were putting £5.4 billion into the NHS over the next 6 months.
OK, Michael, many thanks. Michael Buchanan there. The Home Secretary, Priti Patel, is meeting her French counterpart to discuss the number of people crossing the Channel in small boats to the UK. The Home Office says 785 people made the journey on Monday alone. Ms Patel has warned that Britain could withhold more than £50 million it's promised to pay the French to deal with the problem unless more boats are intercepted. Simon Jones reports.
More migrants brought to Dover this morning by the Border Force after they were picked up in the Channel. Britain and France have repeatedly pledged to make this route unviable. But still, the dangerous journeys continue, and some MPs have had enough.
We need to transport these people directly back to Calais as soon as possible after they've landed in the UK. Now, that would be a diplomatic incident, I realise that, but frankly, I don't know where else we're going to go, because what we need to do is stop this traffic.
The Home Secretary, Priti Patel, is today meeting her French counterpart, Gérald Darmanin, at the G7 Conference of Interior Ministers in London. There's lots to discuss. After a surge in numbers in the past 2 days, with well over 1,000 people reaching the UK. She's already threatened to withdraw some of the £54 million Britain recently promised France to step up police patrols and surveillance on its beaches if it doesn't prevent more crossings. There have been several deals over the years to try to stop the crossings. One of the first was signed 2.5 years ago when the then Home Secretary Sajid Javid came to Dover and declared a major incident. At that time, on the busiest days, around 40 people were making the crossing. Now, though, that figure can be 20 times higher. So far this year, more than 13,500 migrants have reached the UK by boat. That's 5,000 more than in the whole of last year. In the first 6 months of this year, 650 people were found in the back of lorries. The MP for Calais says there's only so much France can do.
1,000 crossing attempts in one night in the last few nights. So basically you see we cannot stop all the crossings because that's, humanly speaking, technically speaking, not possible to monitor 300 or 400 kilometers of shore where you can hide in very different and various places.
The government here says it's working to implement its deal with France.
My right honourable friend, the Home Secretary, is dealing with it in the best possible way, which is to make sure that they don't leave those French shores. We depend to a large extent on what the French are doing, but clearly, as time goes on and this problem continues, we are going to have to make sure that we use every possible tactic at our disposal.
But cross-channel relations are certainly being put to the test. Simon Jones, BBC News, Dover.
The biggest trial in France's modern history has opened in Paris amid tight security. 20 men are accused of involvement in a string of coordinated attacks in 2015, killing 130 people and wounding hundreds more. The attack on bars, restaurants and the Bataclan concert hall was France's worst post-war atrocity. Among the defendants appearing in the specially built chamber is Salah Abdeslam, the only surviving gunman. Well, our correspondent in Paris is Hugh Schofield. Hugh.
Yes, as you say, and as you can imagine, peak security here on the Ile de la Cité, and half of the island has been sealed off by security forces. And inside the Palais de Justice, the historic Palais de Justice behind me here, around the specially constructed courtroom, there's a throng of lawyers, journalists, police and survivors. This promises to be a long, emotional and epoch-making trial, as we hear in this report from my colleague Lucy Williamson.
It was a night with no safe haven, when no one knew where to run. When gunmen brought chaos to Paris's bars and restaurants. Its football stadium. The Bataclan concert hall. Stéphane lost his son Hugo that night at the Bataclan. No trial, he says, can heal the pain.
It was something complicated because it's first of all a personal loss, because of the loss of a child, my son, and it's also a collective loss. And then it was sometimes difficult to manage these two situations.
20 defendants are accused of murder, complicity and terrorist conspiracy. Salah Abdeslam, the only suspected attacker to survive that night, is facing the most serious charges. 19 others are accused of involvement, including Mohamed Abrini, who prosecutors say accompanied the attackers to Paris from their home in Belgium. 6 of the accused are being tried in absentia. And for a unique event, a unique location. This temporary courtroom, built exclusively for the trial, sits within the historic Court of Justice in Paris. The light colours have been chosen to promote a sense of calm. There's a secure box for the defendants and 10 cameras to record the trial for France's national history. The trauma of that night has continued to ripple through France. 6 years on, What will it mean to see Salah Abdeslam standing in the dock?
You know, you just imagine the devil. You just imagine somebody with a strong intellectual, maybe I'm wrong, but people will say, that's this kind of man who have done so awful things.
Stefan says he doesn't need to see the key defendant, but he wants Abdeslam to see him.
After 6 years, it's very important for me to face him and to face the other and to say, okay, look at me, I'm there, I'm alive. My son is not there, but through me is still here. We are still standing. You didn't win.
For Stefan, this trial marks the moment when national trauma becomes national history. Easier for a nation to move on, he says, than for him. Lucy Williamson, BBC News, Paris.
Well, a short time ago, proceedings did get underway and the accused have now been brought into the court. Salah Abdeslam was the last to come in, dressed in a black T-shirt with a black beard. He was asked by the presiding judge what was his profession. He said, soldier of Islamic State.
Hugh, thank you. Hugh Schofield reporting there in Paris. The time is just after 1:15. Our top story this lunchtime. MPs are preparing to vote on the government's controversial plan to raise national insurance to fund the NHS and social care. And the meteorite that landed on a family's driveway in the Cotswolds. Now the scorched tarmac is destined for a museum.
Coming up on the BBC News channel, 5 Premier League clubs will be without the Brazilian players they didn't allow to travel for international matches because of COVID. Players can be banned from appearing for their clubs for 5 days after the international break.
After the desperate scramble to flee Afghanistan, thousands of Afghan refugees are now adjusting to their new lives in the UK. But while 8,000 Afghans were evacuated by the UK military, the question remains of what will happen to those left behind. Joya, whose name we've changed, was an Afghan Special Forces commander who worked alongside British forces and was one of those rescued from Kabul a few weeks ago. Our defence correspondent Jonathan Beale went to meet him.
Afghan Special Forces have been fighting the Taliban for years and taking heavy casualties. Joya was one of their commanders, hand-picked and trained by elite troops from the Parachute Regiment. He was still fighting long after the British left Helmand. This is Joya firing on Taliban positions just 1 month ago. He said they were still fighting until they ran out of ammunition.
Until end we are fight, till we can we fight. And without of any air support, without of ammunition, without of any resupply, how do you can fight? With empty hand you can fight.
By then the Taliban had taken control of Kabul and crowds had gathered outside the airport. The Taliban were already tracking Joya down. But so too were his old friends from the Parachute Regiment in a race against time.
They found my phone number and called me and says, where are you? I'm says I'm in Kabul. And they says, you're safe? Or I says, no, I change my location every night.
2 weeks ago, Joya was living in fear for his life. But today he's tasting freedom, now safe in London with his wife and 2 young children. Rescued at the dead of night by British soldiers who never forgot.
And they says, tomorrow night you come in at midnight at 1 o'clock at the Baron Hotel. We come in and pick up you. And at the midnight, 1 o'clock, I arrive at the Baron Gate. They come out and call my name. Come to the airport and put us on the plane, and we come to Dubai. From Dubai, come to here.
Dan Jarvis.
Later today, I'll be reunited with an Afghan Special Forces commander that I had the privilege of serving alongside. He's deeply concerned about the hundreds of his men who were left behind.
It's an incredibly moving moment for me. I didn't know whether he would make it out of Afghanistan alive or not. It's so good to see you.
14 years after they first met in Helmand, there is genuine relief at being reunited, but also real worries about what will happen to those left behind.
These are people who are uniquely at risk because of the nature of the service that they provided. They are top of the Taliban list for being executed, is the reality of it. So I'm deeply fearful for their future. There is a real urgency, and the British government need to move at pace to do everything that they possibly can to get those people out.
The band of brothers from the Parachute Regiment are now raising funds to help those like Joya who managed to get out. He's now making plans for his family's new life in Britain. He still hopes more of his men will follow. But the question is how. Jonathan Beale, BBC News.
The father of Britney Spears has filed a petition in a Los Angeles court to end his controversial 13-year control over her estate. Jamie Spears took over the running of her life in 2008 because of fears about her mental health. The singer has been to court repeatedly to try to win back control, as our correspondent David Willis reports.
It's an arrangement she has branded toxic. One that Britney Spears says has prevented her from getting married and having a baby. Now her father has finally agreed to relinquish the tight control he's maintained over her multi-million-dollar fortune ever since she was hospitalised with mental health issues following several highly public breakdowns back in 2008. Having long maintained there was no justification for his removal from her conservatorship, Jamie Spears agreed under mounting pressure last month to step down, although he didn't specify when. A petition from Britney Spears' lawyers to remove him was due to be heard later this month. But in papers filed on his behalf, Jamie Spears has now conceded that his daughter's circumstances have changed to the extent that grounds for the establishment of a conservatorship may no longer exist. As Mr. Spears has said again and again, the petition goes on, all he wants is what is best for his daughter. If Miss Spears wants to terminate the conservatorship and believes that she can handle her own life, Mr. Spears believes that she should get that chance. For the Free Britney fans, who've long maintained that the conservatorship amounts to Jamie Spears holding his daughter hostage, it's a major victory. The singer's lawyer, Matthew Rosengart, called it a massive legal victory as well as vindication for Miss Spears. But he said an investigation into allegations of financial mismanagement on the part of Jamie Spears will go on. Ending the conservatorship will give Britney Spears unfettered control over her life, her finances and her health treatment for the first time in 13 years. First, though, it requires the approval of the judge overseeing her case, and the next court hearing is due to take place in 3 weeks' time. David Willis, BBC News, Los Angeles.
Initial results of a post-mortem examination on Geronimo the alpaca show no sign that bovine TB was present in the animal. Geronimo was taken from a farm in South Gloucestershire last week and put down by Department of Environment officials after he twice tested positive for the disease. Well, let's speak now to our correspondent, Andrew Plant. And Andrew, how definitive is this finding?
Hi Rita, a couple of hundred people have gathered outside the DEFRA headquarters here in central London to protest today. Among them, Helen MacDonald, the owner of Geronimo the alpaca. And for her, of course, these initial results come as no surprise. She has long maintained that her alpaca was bovine tuberculosis free. It was imported from New Zealand 4 years ago, then had a couple of positive test results, but she thought they were flawed, and she's fought through the courts for over 4 years now to try to save her alpaca's life. That was a battle she lost about 6 weeks ago, and then this time last week, officials from DEFRA came to her farm in South Gloucestershire and took Geronimo away. The whole thing, though, has sparked a debate about exactly how accurate the bovine tuberculosis testing programme is. It's designed, of course, to keep cattle and cattle farms safe, keep them trading, but still more than 40,000 cows every single year on average are put down after positive tests. And for Helen MacDonald, these initial results really aren't the end of the process. They are not conclusive proof that Geronimo was bovine tuberculosis free. They'll now have to take cells from the animal, send them to a lab and try to culture those in a dish under a microscope. And that, Rita, is as long a process as it sounds. We're told it can take anything from 8 weeks up to 3 or 4 months.
Andrew, many thanks. Andrew Plant there. Part of a family driveway on which a meteorolite landed in February has been removed and will go on display at the Natural History Museum. The meteorite, which is already on display at the museum, crash-landed in Gloucestershire in February. Scientists will carry out research on both the meteorite and the driveway with the aim of increasing our understanding of the solar system. Claire Marshall reports.
In the depths of the winter lockdown, something bright came to Earth. A blazing fireball from back in deep time landed on a driveway in the Cotswolds. It was a space rock 4.6 billion years old. This is material from the very beginnings of the solar system. The last trace of that extraordinary intergalactic journey has been lying here on that driveway in Winchcombe. Today, the painstaking operation to preserve the landing site. So they've cut all the tarmac out around where the meteorite landed. You see how thick it is. And now comes the very delicate operation to try to get it all out in one piece.
It's gone to plan, so please. If it was in 3 pieces, less please, but...
Do you feel proud of your work?
We can go home now. Yeah. Smile. Yeah.
It looks unremarkable, but the clues in this extraterrestrial shadow will help scientists understand how the planets and life itself were created. A big day for the homeowners.
They will study this one for hundreds of years, literally, and learn a lot from it.
Yeah. So will you keep your eyes to the skies now?
Always, always, and we'll always have an interest in it because we've been inspired by the scientists we've met, so we always want to keep going. Yeah.
Waiting for that next fireball.
Yeah.
This is the most important meteorite ever to have fallen in Britain. It will help reveal the birth of the solar system. Claire Marshall, BBC News, Gloucestershire.
Golf's Open Championship is set to return to Northern Ireland. The tournament organisers, the Royal and Ancient, have confirmed that Royal Portrush will host the event once more in 2025 after its success there 2 years ago. Well, our reporter Stephen Watson is on the North Antrim coast at the golf course for us. Stephen.
Reeta, thank you. The 2019 Open Championship, won by Irishman Shane Lowry, was hailed as a tremendous sporting, economic and commercial success. There were record ticket sales outside of the home of golf St Andrews of over 237,000. The event generated over £100 million for the local economy, and Royal Portrush and Northern Ireland were thrust into the global sporting spotlight with over 5,500 hours of worldwide television exposure. The chief executive of the sports governing body, the R&A, explained why they've decided to bring the event back so soon.
It ticked a lot of boxes. You know, I genuinely believe that big time sport needs big time venues and big time crowds, and it was not just that enthusiasm, but it was that level of slightly different. There were different people who'd never been to the Open before, and for us it was really important that we felt if we come back quickly, we're going to reinforce that and build on that. If we delayed, we might have lost some of that magic. So I think that swayed us in our thinking.
Well, it took 68 years for the Open Championship to return to Royal Portrush back in 2019. The only other time it had been staged previously was 1951. But the gap this time will be just 6 years when the Open is staged on the stunning North Coast in 2025. And the R&A are promising to deliver an even better event then. Reeta.
Many thanks, Stephen. The last British hope in the US Open singles tournament, Emma Radekanu, has said her run feels surreal as she prepares to compete for a place in the semi-finals. The teenager faces the Swiss 11th seed Belinda Bencic, who won the Olympic title last month. Let's speak now to our correspondent Russell Fuller, who's in New York for us. And Russell, huge excitement around Emma.
It's been the most remarkable summer of success, Reeta, for Emma Radekanu, who reached the 4th round of Wimbledon, having not played for 15 months because of the pandemic. And then, just a few weeks after receiving her A-level results, has made it through to the quarterfinals here in New York. And as a qualifier, so she had to win 3 matches in qualifying just to get in the main draw. She's then won another 4 matches, all in straight sets. And if she beats Belinda Bencic today, she'll be only the 4th female qualifier in history to reach the semi-finals of the US Open. Bencic, the Olympic champion, says she's still on cloud 9. Radekanu will also have to deal with the giant Arthur Ashe Stadium, which seats nearly 24,000 people. But she's been very comfortable in New York, signing autographs, posing for photographs. She's also very much enjoyed the media experience in the infancy of her career. She's given interviews to the New York Times, to Japanese television. She also had a question the other day in her news conference from Der Spiegel magazine in Germany, and she's loving the experience. I asked her the other day whether she was missing home and whether she was missing her parents. She's been on the road for 6 weeks. It's the longest trip of her life, and she said with a smile on her face, isn't it every young girl's dream to have an adventure like this? Martina Navratilova, a great Grand Slam champion herself, has said she doesn't think she'll win this US Open, but she does expect her to win the big titles in years to come.
Russell, many thanks. Time for a look at the weather now. Here's Chris Fawkes.
Hi Rita, and we've got more of that hot and sunny weather to come for many of us through the rest of the day today. But for some, the change to thundery weather that's ultimately coming for all of us has arrived. Now, across southwest England, we've seen some big storms, some hefty downpours that have brought some reports of localised flooding into parts of Devon, for example, around the Salcombe area earlier this morning. And you can see the extent of the sunny weather for most of the UK. This line of storms, though, extends all the way from northwest France, across the southwest of England, into southern areas of Wales too. The line of storms isn't going to move very much this afternoon. Some areas not getting much in the way of rain at all, but perhaps down the road, 30 to 50 millimetres, hence an ongoing threat of localised flash flooding. Now, away from those storms, we've got the hot and sunny weather. Temperatures at the highest stretching from the London area across the Midlands into the northwest of both England and Wales and southwest Scotland. High 20s widely, but the hottest areas again likely to hit the 30 mark over the next hour or two. Now, beyond that, during this evening and overnight, we'll see those showers become more extensive across England, Wales and Northern Ireland. It is going to be another very warm night. These are not the minimum temperatures, but the temperatures, perhaps as you're thinking of going to bed, still widely up into the 20s, I think, for many of us at 11 o'clock tonight. Now, beyond that, low pressure is going to be moving in, so a real change in weather fortunes for many of us tomorrow. With showers and thunderstorms in the forecast, those storms are going to become widespread. 20 to 40 millimetres of rain in the heaviest of those downpours. And again, there's a risk of some localised flooding along with that. Temperatures coming down somewhat, but still very warm across eastern England. 25 degrees there in Norwich, 24 for Hull, whereas further west, generally the low 20s. Now, Thursday evening sees those storms really start to make their impact felt in Scotland. Again, there could be a few issues here. And for Friday, the same area of low pressure is on the chart, so it's another unsettled day. Showers and thunderstorms, sunny spells between these, but still some fairly hefty downpours to come. Those temperatures, not bad for the time of year, still around 20 to 23 degrees Celsius for most of us. Now, let's take a look at the charts into the weekend. That area of low pressure will be slipping out of the way, and it looks like the weather's going to try to become a little bit drier. There could just be a few patches of rain around here and there through the weekend. But one thing you will notice if you live across the northern half of the UK is during Sunday it's going to start to feel a good deal cooler and fresher. So hot and sunny weather, yes, for many of us today, Rita, but some big thunderstorms on the way as well. That's the latest.
OK. Chris, many thanks. A reminder now of our top story. MPs are preparing to vote on the government's controversial plan to raise national insurance to fund the NHS and social care. Labour says the policy won't stop some people having to sell their homes to fund care. Well, that's all from the BBC News at 1, so it's goodbye from me. And on BBC One, we now join the BBC's news teams where you are. Bye-bye.